Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth. Let's get into it. Before I get into this one, here's a lesson that would have saved me months of self-betrayal. When somebody starts using the word insecure, every time you ask a reasonable question, pay attention. That is not always confidence talking. Sometimes it is camouflage. In this story, my wife did not just hide what she was doing. She trained me to doubt my own eyes, and that was the part that cost me the most. Another thing, if a person ever answers accountability with, "I've got options," believe what they are really saying. They are not fighting for the relationship. They are testing how much disrespect you will absorb before you finally choose yourself. I did not understand that at the moment. I understood it later, after the noise died down, after the house got quiet, and after her so-called options disappeared one by one. Before we get into what really happened, if you have ever watched somebody turn a simple question into you're insecure just to dodge accountability, go ahead and like this video. Share it with somebody who needs this reminder, and subscribe for more real relationship drama stories where the red flags start small and end big. My name is Josiah Mercer, and the exact moment my marriage broke apart did not happen in a hotel room or a parking lot or some dramatic scene with rain pouring down. It happened in my kitchen in Baltimore on a Wednesday in late March, with the smell of fried white still clinging to the air and my wife leaning against the counter in a cream pantsuit I had paid to have tailored. I asked her one direct question. She looked me in my face and said, "You are acting like I do not have options." That was the first honest thing she had said to me in months. We had been married for 6 years. I was 38, a transit electrician for the city, the kind of man who trusted schedules, labels, and the satisfying click of a breaker panel returning to life. My hands always smelled faintly of metal and citrus hand, soap, no matter how hard I scrubbed. I restored old radios on Sunday afternoons at a workbench in the basement, and I kept our monthly budget on a yellow legal pad folded into thirds inside the kitchen drawer. My wife, Camille, was 35 and lived as if ordinary life were a personal insult. Camille owned a small event styling business called Satin Stem. She made baby showers look like magazine spreads and turned church fellowship halls into soft, candlelit rooms with rented arches, draped fabric, and centerpieces nobody remembered to take home. She wore a silver tape measure around her neck when she was working, like a seamstress crossed with conductor. She hated overhead lights. She called plain water uninspired, and said the word elevate so often became part of the wallpaper in our marriage. If I said we needed groceries, she said, "Let's elevate how we eat." We met at a school supply drive in Cherry Hill. I was unloading donated backpacks from the back of a church van, and Camille was organizing pencils by color because, as she told me, children deserve order too. That line got me, not because it was flashy, but because it sounded like I was wearing nice shoes. She had a laugh that came out in a single surprise burst, like she was catching herself. We drank half-sweet tea from foam cups on the church steps after cleanup, and by the end of that evening, I knew her brother's names, her favoritism, and that she could not stand a crooked picture frame. Early on, she made my life feel less narrow. She would drag me out for crab cakes near the harbor after I had planned another quiet Friday with leftovers and an Orioles game on low volume. She took the starch out of me. I gave her steadiness, and she gave me motion. That is how I explain us to people. What I did not say was that even in the good years, Camille treated every room like an audience. She wanted admiration the way some people need sleep. Not paying attention, exactly. Confirmation. Proof that she was still the brightest thing in sight. We lived in a row house in West Baltimore that my grandmother left me before I got married. The front steps always needed sweeping because the sycamore out front shed bark like old paper. On summer nights, the block smelled like charcoal, detergent, and somebody's uncle's cologne drifting from an open screen door. Miss Evelyn next door played gospel before 10 every morning. And on Saturdays, the boys from around the corner bounced a scuffed basketball hard enough to rattle my front windows. It was not fancy, but it was ours, and I thought Camille loved it because she said she did. The first crack was so small, I am embarrassed by how carefully I stepped around it. Camille started leaving her phone face down on the table. Not every time, just enough for me to notice. She also started locking the bathroom door when she showered, which she had never done before, and taking vendor calls on the front steps where her voice dipped low and private. When I asked who kept calling after 11, she smiled without warmth and said, "Men in business do this all the time, and nobody asks their wives for a logbook. I should tell you something true about me. I hate chaos so much that I will sometimes choose confusion over conflict. My parents ended their marriage in a long series of loud, humiliating fights that spilled into yards, parking lots, and family dinners. I was 12 when I learned that two adults could use a child as a witness stand. So when something feels wrong, my first instinct is not to explode. It is to go quiet, gather facts, and hope I am mistaken. That instinct saved me at work more than once. It nearly ruined me at home. Around that time, Camille began coming home later from setup meetings in Harbor East, smelling like expensive hotel lobbies and citrus perfume samples. She had new clients, she said, higher-end people, better money. I wanted to believe that because her business had plateaued, and I knew how much she hated feeling small. Still, a receipt slid from her purse one night when she tipped it over looking for lip balm. 2 entrees, 2 cocktails, valet parking. Tuesday at 10:48 p.m. She saw me looking at it and said, "Too fast." That was a client consultation. I could have pressed her right there. Instead, I made my first bad decision. I let it go because my older sister was recovering from surgery that week, and I had already spent 3 nights driving back and forth to St. Agnes to help with her kids. I told myself I did not have the emotional room for a marriage fight on top of family stress. That was true. The problem was what I did with that truth. I turned it into permission to ignore the feeling that had already started to gather behind my ribs like storm pressure. Spring became summer. Camille's business looked busy from the outside. Sample candles arrived, velvet ribbons, acrylic signage, fake eucalyptus in enormous cardboard boxes. But money kept disappearing faster than it came in. She said image mattered. Nobody hires a tired-looking planner, Josiah. There were salon appointments twice a week, lash appointments, a wardrobe refresh, a new phone for business, and enough rideshare charges to make me wonder whether she still remembered how to parallel park. I covered the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and insurance while telling myself a strong season would settle everything. I even helped her build out a better booking system. One Sunday afternoon, while she sat cross-legged on the couch in a silk scarf and worked on mood boards, I stayed at the dining room table setting up invoice templates and deposit reminders. My old radio parts were spread out in the basement waiting for me, but I chose her business because I believe in marriage the way some people believe in weather. It may shift, but you still live under it. Camille kissed my forehead and said, "This is why I chose you. You make things work." I held on to that sentence longer than I should have. The second crack came with a name, Terrence. It flashed across her screen while we were eating breakfast at the diner near Mondawmin, where the coffee is never hot enough, and the grits come out stiff unless Miss Carroll is working. Camille snatched her phone, so quickly she knocked over the jelly caddy. I looked at her. She looked back and smiled like I was the one being odd. "A florist," she said. "Please do not start." I had not started anything. That was the first time she answered my silence like it was an accusation. A week later, I was in Dwayne's barbershop on Edmondson, getting my usual low cut while the men in the chairs argued about the Ravens and housing taxes. I mentioned casually that Camille's business had her keeping strange hours. Dwayne did not know her well, but he knew people, and he had that older man habit of hearing the sentence underneath the sentence. He trimmed my line, looked at me in the mirror, and said, "Do not let peace make you gullible, Joe. Peace and fear look alike on quiet men." I laughed then. Later, in the car, I wrote it down. By August, Camille had started dressing for grocery runs like she was being photographed. She would stand in the hallway mirror, adjusting an earring, then say she was going to meet a client for 20 minutes and not come back for 4 hours. Her tone would be changed in subtle ways. More corrections. Less softness. If I asked whether she would be home for dinner, she said, "I cannot report my movements every hour." If I asked whether she wanted me to save her a plate, she said, "You turn everything into supervision." She had a talent for making ordinary marriage sound like surveillance. Then there was Labor Day at my cousin Bernard's cookout. Children ran through the alley with plastic water guns. The men worked the grill like a council, and Bernard kept insisting everybody try his peach cobbler before the pan cooled. Camille floated through that yard like she belonged to every conversation but mine. I watched her laugh too long at something one of Bernard's co-workers said, hand resting on his shoulder a second past normal, then slip into the side driveway to take a call with her voice lowered. I followed halfway, stopped, and turned around. That was my second bad decision. I turned around because I did not want to create a scene in front of my family. That matters to me. Public humiliation changes the shape of a memory forever, and my family had already lived through enough loud hurt. I told myself I would wait and ask her at home, where words could stay between us. But when we got home, she was all perfume and irritation. "Do not bring your moods in here," she said, kicking off her heels. So I did what I had started doing too often. I folded my hurt into a smaller shape and carried it alone. Looking back, what shames me is not that I trusted my wife. Trust is not stupidity. What shames me is how often I use my own good character against myself. I kept translating her contempt into stress, her secrecy into independence, her dishonesty into ambition. Every time something did not add up, I found the most generous explanation and called it maturity. Meanwhile, she was studying my habits, which bills I paid first, which passwords I reused, which subjects would make me retreat. She was not just lying. She was learning the map of what I would tolerate. In September, she asked me to add her as an authorized user on one of my credit cards, strictly for event supply emergencies. I hesitated. She heard the hesitation and changed her whole face, like an actress hitting her cue. "You do not trust me," she said, quiet and wounded. "You trust me to build a home with you, but not to buy candles and linens?" I caved because the request sounded practical, and because marriage is full of tiny decisions that seem too small to deserve a courtroom level of scrutiny. Within 6 weeks, the balance had climbed past what her business had ever brought in. When I raised that issue, Camille stood at the sink rinsing wine glasses and laughed under her breath. "You really do make everything ugly," she said. "I am trying to grow." Something. You are counting paper clips. I remember that sentence because it rearranged the room for me. I was not counting paper clips. I was trying to understand how a woman whose business deposits had slowed to almost nothing was spending like somebody had quietly put a second salary in our mailbox. She dried one glass, set it down carefully, and said, "Secure men invest." I started keeping notes after that, not because I planned to leave, not yet, but because reality kept sliding out from under me. Dates, charges, late arrivals, contradictions. A hotel brunch she claimed was a baby shower consultation on a day she had no booking. A cash withdrawal near BWI, when she had supposedly spent the entire afternoon in Colombia meeting a balloon vendor. I felt sick doing it. I also felt sane for the first time in months. Facts have a steadying effect. They do not heal you, but they can stop you from swallowing your own confusion. My friend Tasha, who handles payroll at a law office downtown and has known me since Morgan State Summerbridge, noticed I was fraying. We met for coffee before my shift one gray Tuesday, rain needling against the windows, buses hissing at the curb outside. I told her just enough, not the whole thing. Tasha stirred her tea and said, "Separate your money before you separate your feelings. Feelings make people negotiate against themselves." I did not want to hear that. It sounded cold. She slid 2 sugar packets toward me and said, "Cold is not the same as cruel." That night, I opened a new checking account and redirected my direct deposit. I did not announce it. I did not threaten. I simply stopped letting my pay land in a place where confusion had become expensive. I made that choice because by then I understood that confrontation, without preparation, would only give Camille room to perform. She was quick on her feet, especially when emotion entered the room. I was not trying to win an argument anymore. I was trying to keep my life from being used as a stage set for one more version of her innocence. For 2 weeks after that, The house felt like a train platform where both people knew one was about to leave, but nobody had said the departure out loud. Camille stayed sharper than usual, watching me in little sideways glances. She cooked my favorite smothered turkey wings one Sunday and asked whether I still wanted to take a winter trip to New Orleans like we had discussed months earlier. It almost worked. Familiarity is powerful. A soft voice over rice and gravy can make a man question what his own eyes have recorded, but the distance in her eyes kept betraying the sweetness in her mouth. The actual proof landed on a Wednesday, because that is how life works. Not during a carefully planned moment. Not after a dramatic build. Just a Wednesday. I got off early because a route inspection wrapped ahead of schedule. The sky over Baltimore was low and white. That dull color gets before cold rain. I stopped at a carryout for lemon pepper wings and came home expecting an empty house. Camille's car was outside. Inside, I heard the shower running upstairs, and her phone was vibrating hard across the kitchen island like it was trying to crawl away. I stood there longer than I want to admit. My first thought was that I am not going to catch her. My first thought was, please let this be harmless. Then the screen lit up again. Malik, still on for tonight? Another message slid beneath it before the first one faded. Andre, you left your earring in my truck. Then another. Darius, tell your husband whatever story you want, but do not play with me too. The room went so still I could hear the shower pipe knocking inside the wall. I did not touch the phone. I did not need to. When Camille came downstairs, she was toweling her hair, humming under her breath. She saw the expression on my face and froze. Not for long. Camille recovered quickly. Always. Why are you standing there like that? She asked. I told her to read her own screen. She looked at the phone, then at me, and her body changed. The softness fell out of her. Her chin lifted. Her eyes cooled. You're going through my phone now, she said. I said, I did not have to. Your life is buzzing loud enough to introduce itself. She walked to the island, picked up a phone, and laughed once. Not nervous. Dismissive. You're making a scene over messages? She said. I asked who Malik was. She shrugged. I asked about Andre. She rolled her eyes. I asked about Darius. That is when her mouth flattened and the whole performance dropped. I am not doing this like you are my father, she said. Men want me. I'm sorry if that bruises your ego. I said, we are married. She looked me dead in my face and said, and I got options, Josiah. I do not remember setting my food down. I remember the grease staining through the bottom of the paper bag onto the counter. I remember staring at a wet crescent on the kitchen tile where one drop from her hair had fallen. Strange things become important when your life cracks open. I asked, very quietly, whether she had slept with any of them. Camille folded the towel once, precise and almost elegant, then said, maybe if you were not so predictable, I would not have needed choices. The cruelty of that sentence cleared my head better than any confession could have. I did not shout. That mattered, not because shouting would have made me weak, but because I knew the second my voice rose, she would switch the script and make me the danger. Instead, I pulled out a chair and sat down. I want you to hear me clearly, I said. We are done. She blinked, surprised. I do not think she expected finality from me. Discomfort, pleading, bargaining, maybe, not finality. Do not be dramatic, she said, grabbing a bottle of water. You are upset. You will calm down. I said, no. You confuse my patience with dependence. She started pacing. So what? You are throwing away 6 years because I entertain attention? I let that sit between us. Then I said, I am ending this because you turn our marriage into a waiting room while you audition replacements. Camille laughed again, but was thinner now. Do not flatter yourself. You are not irreplaceable. I looked around my own kitchen, at the legal pad in the drawer, the little chip in the cabinet door, the wedding picture by the fridge that suddenly looked like a lie in a silver frame. Neither are you, I said. That night, I slept in the basement on the old daybed beside my radio bench. I barely slept at all. Around 1 a.m, I heard Camille upstairs moving from room to room, cabinet doors opening and shutting, then her heels on hardwood as she paced. At 3, She came to the basement door in one of my college sweatshirts and said, soft as rain, "Let's not ruin our lives over this." That almost broke me, not because I believed her, but because she still thought the right tone could erase the content. I told her to close the door behind her. By 9 the next morning, I had called a lawyer Tasha recommended and scheduled a consultation. The facts mattered. The house being inherited before marriage mattered. The credit card statements mattered. The screenshots I had taken off our call log, the strange charges, the timeline, all of it mattered. I learned what separation would look like, what I could change immediately, and what I needed to document. Law has no room for heartbreak as a special category. I found that oddly comforting. My feelings were on fire. The procedure gave me a place to set my feet. Camille switched tactics every few hours for the next week. Some mornings she was all tears and tremble, asking whether one mistake should define a woman forever. By lunch she would be cold again, saying maybe a little distance would help me appreciate her value. At night she became practical, wanted to discuss an arrangement where we stayed married publicly while privately giving each other room. That was the moment I understood her phrase about options was not an emotional outburst. It was a philosophy. To Camille, loyalty was for people with fewer choices, fewer mirrors, fewer exits. I moved half my clothes to Bernard's basement apartment on the east side that weekend. Bernard was a mail carrier with a laugh like a truck starting up and a habit of falling asleep in front of boxing reruns. His basement smelled like starch, cedar, and whatever soup his wife kept simmering upstairs. I made that move not because I wanted to abandon my home, but because peace had become impossible inside it. Every surface held an argument. Every room felt staged. I needed sleep, and I needed my next decisions to come from rest instead of adrenaline. Once my paycheck stopped hitting the joint account, the performance changed. Camille's confidence had always rested partly on my ability to absorb the consequences of her impulses. Without that cushion, the world started sending back the bills she had postponed with charm. A florist called asking about an overdue balance. A rental company emailed about damaged candle cylinders. One venue manager wanted to know why a deposit had bounced twice. Camille came to Bernard's one evening in a wool coat and anger, saying I was sabotaging her business. I told her I was simply no longer financing her lies. She showed up again 3 days later, this time in tears, sitting in her car outside the curb with the heat running and gospel playing low through cracked speakers. I went out because neighbors were watching, and I still care about dignity even then. She said one of the men, Malik, had gotten too attached and caused problems. She said another was married and had disappeared the second things turned inconvenient. She said Andre had never intended anything serious. Then she looked at me like that was supposed to soften me. Instead, it taught me what her options really were. Exits, not anchors. Around then, my mother called and asked whether Camille was all right, because Camille had told her we were under strain, and I was being rigid. My mother has a voice that can lower your temperature by 10 degrees. She listened to me describe the bare facts. Then she said, "Baby, do not confuse mercy with reentry." I sat in Bernard's basement on an upturned milk crate, holding my phone, and let that settle in. I could speak to Camille with decency. I did not owe her restoration. That distinction saved me from a lot of sentimental stupidity in the months ahead. Camille tried public pressure next, at church anniversary service, where the choir robes always smell faintly of starch and perfume, and the fellowship hall coffee tastes like it was brewed during the Clinton administration. She walked on my arm's reach as if nothing had happened. She smiled at women who had prayed over our marriage, hugged my aunties, and called me honey loud enough for people to hear. For 10 full seconds, I considered exposing everything right there between the pound cake table and the usher board. I chose not to. Not for her. For me, some truths should not be dragged through potato salad. Instead, after service, I told Pastor Webb privately that Camille and I were separating and that I would not discuss details in the church hallway. He nodded, rubbed his beard once, and said, "Wise." That conversation mattered more than any dramatic reveal would have, because it shut down Camille's attempt to use community as camouflage. Once people knew there was a separation without hearing a messy story, her performance lost some of its leverage. She could still imply things, but she could not stage manage the entire room. Quiet clarity can be stronger than spectacle when the facts eventually catch up. The legal process crawled, as legal processes do. Paperwork, disclosures, account records, inventory property, dates, signatures. In those weeks, I got more honest with myself than I had been in years. I admitted I had liked being needed. I admitted some part of me took pride in being the stable husband who could rescue, fund, fix, absorb. That did not excuse what Camille had done, but explained why I had ignored the cost of being useful long after usefulness had become exploitation. Shame became easier to carry once I stopped confusing it with guilt. I had been deceived. I had also participated in the fiction. In November, my lawyer received spending records that filled in ugly gaps. Hotel dining, gift purchases, car service rides on nights Camille had told me she was meeting women from her industry. Nothing explicit, but enough to remove all remaining doubt. When Camille and I sat across from each other in mediation, she still tried to work angles. "We both made mistakes," she said, folding her hands like a woman receiving an award. I nearly laughed. My mistake was waiting too long. Hers was building a life around the assumption that charm could outrun consequences forever. Those are not equivalent failures. Her face changed when the mediator mentioned debt responsibility. It was not terror exactly, more like disbelief. Camille had always assumed there would be one more bridge to walk across, one more person to convince, one more soft place to land. Now she was hearing, in plain English, that some of the balances in her business name and the personal spending she could not explain were going to stay with her. She looked at me for help. Not love. Help. The old reflex jumped in my chest before I could stop it. Then I remembered the kitchen. I've got options. I stayed still. The divorce was finalized just after New Year's. Baltimore in January has a way of making every block look tired. Snow turns gray in a day. The harbor wind cuts through wool, and everybody walks faster with their shoulders up. I moved back into my house full-time and repainted the dining room myself. A warm brown Camille always said was too dull. I took our wedding picture off the shelf and put an old Zenith radio there instead, polished until it would glowed. The silence in that house was different now. Not empty. Rested. There is relief that feels almost like grief until your body learns the difference. The last time I saw Camille was in early March, nearly a year after the kitchen. She asked to meet at a diner downtown near the courthouse, a place with cracked red booze and a waitress who called everybody baby regardless of age. Camille arrived 10 minutes late in a camel coat that had seen better seasons. Her nails were bare. Her hair was pulled back, without her usual precision. She looked beautiful in a tired way, like somebody who had spent too long trying to look untouched. When she sat down, she did not smile. "I made a mess of my life," she said. I believed her. That was the hard part. Regret had finally reached her, and it seemed genuine enough to sting. She told me Malik had moved on. Andre stopped answering. And the married man had blocked her before Christmas. Her business was barely hanging on. Her mother was embarrassed. Friends had thinned out. She said she kept hearing herself in that kitchen and wished she could pull the words back. Then she looked at me with eyes I once would have mistaken for hope and said, "You were the only real one." I paid for my coffee, stood up and said, "That was your job to value when you still had it." What stays with me from this story is not the cheating by itself. It is a pattern around it. The hotel receipts explain away, the secure men invest line, the church performance, and that kitchen sentence about options. Betrayal usually announces itself before the big reveal. It shows up in how someone handles a question, how quickly they make your boundary sound like a flaw, and how often your reality gets edited to protect their image. Also, notice what actually ended this marriage. Not revenge, not humiliation, not me becoming cruel. It was documentation, distance, separate accounts, legal clarity, and refusing to rescue Camille once the men she called options turned out to be exits. Sometimes the strongest move is not proving what somebody lost. It is stepping back far enough that they have to sit in it, without using your kindness as a life raft. If this story showed you anything, it is that the real revenge is not yelling louder. It is letting consequences speak after the lies run out. If Camille's "I've got options" line made your blood boil, like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful relationship stories. And subscribe for more original cheating wife regret stories, betrayal drama, and first-person revenge narratives. The end.